In this video we will listen to 2 earthquake horror stories. In each horror story we guarantee you'll be frightened. If you have any questions about these earthquake storm horror stories, be sure to leave a comment down below. If you like these horror stories, be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an upload. I hope you enjoy these earthquake horror stories. San Demetrio was a sleepy town nestled in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada, known for its serene beauty and peaceful community. It was the last place anyone expected to become the epicenter of terror, but the Earth's fury is rarely predictable. On an unassuming Friday morning, the first tremor struck. It was minor, barely strong enough to rattle dishes, but it set off a chain of unease. Old-timers muttered about pressure building and the big one, while younger residents laughed it off, joking that it was a free ride. For geologist Dr. Claire Asher, it was the start of something much more sinister. Claire had been studying seismic activity in the area for years. The Sierra fault line had been dormant for centuries, but her instruments told a different story. For weeks, she'd been recording deep, low-frequency rumbles from beneath the Earth's crust, sounds that shouldn't exist, at least not there. And then there were the strange heat readings from the fault line, as if something massive and molten was moving deep underground. The second tremor came that night, a 4.8 on the Richter scale, strong enough to crack walls and send nervous residents spilling out into the streets. Claire's phone rang incessantly as colleagues and local officials demanded answers. But what could she say? That she had no idea what was happening, or that her data hinted at something impossible. By morning, Claire made a chilling discovery. The fault line wasn't shifting in the usual jagged pattern. It was undulating, as if something alive was pushing against it. She tried to convince the mayor to evacuate the town, but he dismissed her concerns as overblown. "We've lived through quakes before," he said. "San Demetrio isn't going anywhere." That evening, the earth roared. The quake that struck registered a 7.9. Buildings crumbled like sandcastles, and the ground split open in jagged, yawning fissures. Claire barely escaped her home as it collapsed, stumbling into the chaos outside. Screams filled the air, mingling with the deafening roar of cracking earth. Cars overturned, gas lines ruptured, and fires erupted across the town. But amidst the destruction, Claire noticed something far more horrifying. The fissures weren't just cracks, they pulsed. From one gaping rift near the town center, a thick, sulfurous mist rose, carrying a heat so intense it singed her skin from several yards away. As she watched in stunned horror, something emerged from the fissure. It was colossal, a mass of jagged, obsidian-like rock and glowing magma, its form vaguely humanoid but constantly shifting. Its eyes were twin orbs of molten gold, glaring at the terrified townsfolk. The creature let out a guttural, grinding roar that resonated through the ground, shaking those still standing to their knees. This was no natural phenomenon. It was an ancient force, awakened after millennia of slumber. Claire's mind raced. Legends of the Sierra Nevada spoke of a primordial being, Earthbinder, said to guard the balance between surface dwellers and the underworld. Had centuries of drilling, mining, and seismic disturbances disturbed its rest? And if so, how could they hope to survive its wrath? The creature began to move, each step a cataclysm that sent shockwaves rippling through the earth. Buildings toppled, and the fissures widened, swallowing entire streets. Claire knew she had to act. In her lab at the university, she had been working on an experimental seismic disruptor, a device designed to release built-up tectonic pressure in controlled bursts. It wasn't meant for this, but it was their only hope. She fought her way through the chaos, dodging falling debris and the flaming wreckage of her town. At the lab, she found the disruptor miraculously intact, though its power source had been damaged. Claire scavenged what she could, cobbling together a makeshift generator to power the device. She programmed it to target the epicenter of the quake, hoping it would either subdue the creature or drive it back into the depths. Transporting the device to the fissure was a nightmare. The creature's rampage had turned San Demetrio into a war zone. Roads were impassable, and the air was thick with ash and smoke. Claire's lungs burned as she dragged the disruptor on a makeshift cart, every step a test of her resolve. Finally, she reached the fissure. The creature loomed above, its molten eyes fixed on her as if sensing her intent. With shaking hands, she activated the disruptor. A piercing wave of sound and energy erupted from the device, cutting through the air like a blade. The creature let out a deafening roar, its form convulsing as the ground beneath it quaked even harder. For a moment, it seemed to work. The fissures began to close, and the creature's glowing form dimmed. But then the disruptor's makeshift generator exploded, sending Claire flying. She hit the ground hard, her vision swimming as the world around her dissolved into chaos. When she regained consciousness, the town was eerily silent. The creature was gone, and the fissures had sealed, leaving only scorched scars in the earth. San Demetrio was a wasteland, its residents scattered or lost. Claire lay amidst the rubble, alive but broken. In the following days, rescue teams found her and a handful of survivors. The official reports blamed the destruction on a massive earthquake, but Claire knew the truth. The Earthbinder had returned to its slumber, but not before leaving a mark that would never fade. Deep beneath the surface, the creature waited, and as Claire recovered, she couldn't shake the feeling that one day, it would rise again. The first warning came as a vibration, so faint that only those close to the earth could feel it. Farmers in the remote town of Almeida, Oregon, spoke of their animals acting strangely, dogs whining at the horizon, cattle refusing to graze, and birds abandoning the area altogether. For days, the tremors grew stronger, but what unnerved the townsfolk most was the sound, a low, hollow groan that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth, like a giant exhaling in its sleep. By the time the quake hit, it was too late. Dr. Rachel Myers, a seismologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, had been dispatched to Almeida to investigate the unusual activity. She arrived just as the 6.2 quake struck. Rachel barely managed to take cover under her desk as the ground bucked like a living thing. Bookshelves toppled, windows shattered, and the air was filled with a terrible grinding noise that seemed to pierce her very bones. When it was over, the town lay in ruins, its streets split by gaping fissures. But the quake was only the beginning. As Rachel emerged into the chaos, she noticed something odd about the fissures. They weren't just cracks, they were perfectly round, like tunnels carved by some enormous drill. Steam and the acrid stench of sulfur rose from their depths, along with a faint, rhythmic sound, a beating, like the pulse of a monstrous heart. "It's coming from below," Rachel whispered, though she didn't know what it was. Her equipment showed bizarre seismic patterns, unlike anything she'd ever seen. The fault line wasn't just shifting, it was collapsing inward, as if something beneath the surface was devouring it. As night fell, the ground began to tremble again. Rachel joined the townsfolk who had gathered in the high school gymnasium, the only building still standing. They huddled together, their faces illuminated by the dim glow of lanterns. The tremors were constant now, accompanied by that dreadful groaning sound. And then they heard the screams. They came from outside, sharp and sudden, cutting through the oppressive noise of the quake. Rachel and a few others ventured out cautiously, flashlights slicing through the darkness. They found no people, only trails of blood leading to the largest fissure. It was wider now, its edges crumbling as if something massive were climbing out. A deafening roar erupted from the chasm, a sound so alien it defied description. Rachel stumbled back as the ground beneath her heaved, and she watched in horror as a creature emerged. It was immense, its form hidden in shadows, but its glowing, multifaceted eyes shone like malevolent stars. Its body was a grotesque amalgamation of stone and flesh, with jagged, rock-like protrusions that dripped molten lava. It moved with a horrifying, serpentine grace, its clawed limbs digging into the earth as it pulled itself free. "Run!" Rachel screamed, but the townsfolk were frozen, paralyzed by fear. The creature let out another roar, and the fissure erupted, spewing magma and ash. The gymnasium collapsed in an instant, burying those who hadn't fled. Rachel ran, her heart pounding as she dodged falling debris and leaping flames. Behind her, the creature began its advance, each step sending shockwaves through the ground. Rachel found refuge in an abandoned mineshaft on the outskirts of town. She barricaded herself inside, her breathing ragged as she tried to process what she had seen. The creature wasn't just an animal, it was the embodiment of the Earth's rage, a primordial being awakened by humanity's endless drilling, mining, and fracking. She realized the truth with a sickening clarity. The earthquakes weren't natural, they were the creature's attempts to break free. The night dragged on, each hour punctuated by distant screams and the relentless groaning of the earth. Rachel's mind raced as she tried to think of a solution. She remembered the experimental seismic detonators stored in the town's emergency supply center. Designed to stabilize fault lines, they might be able to collapse the fissures and trap the creature underground. At dawn, Rachel made her move. The town was a smoldering wasteland, its streets littered with rubble and ash. The creature was nowhere to be seen, but its presence was everywhere. Massive claw marks gouged into the earth, pools of molten rock bubbling in its wake. Rachel reached the supply center and found the detonators intact. She loaded them onto a cart and headed for the largest fissure. As she approached, the ground began to shake violently. The creature emerged again, its molten eyes locking onto her. Rachel felt a wave of primal terror, but forced herself to keep moving. She placed the detonators around the fissure's edges, her hands trembling as she set the timers. The creature roared, its massive form lurching toward her. With seconds to spare, Rachel activated the detonators and ran. The explosions were deafening, and the ground gave way beneath the creature, dragging it back into the abyss. It let out a final, earth-shaking roar as the fissure collapsed, burying it beneath tons of rock and molten debris. Rachel collapsed, her body shaking with exhaustion and relief. The tremor ceased, and an eerie silence settled over the town. But as she looked back at the smoldering fissure, she knew this wasn't over. The creature had been stopped, but it wasn't dead. It was only sleeping, waiting for the day when humanity's greed would awaken it once more. Deep in the earth, the beating continued, slow and steady, like the ticking of a clock counting down to the next catastrophe.